Hi, how are ya? If you don't know who I am, my name is Charlotte McFarland, and today we're going to talk about a topic called spiraling. Now, spiraling is, by dictionary definition, an act that shows continuous dramatic increase. When someone's spiraling, something sparks that spiral and causes them to have a whirlwind of thoughts, hence the spiraling. And that whirlwind doesn't deplete, it increases. And so, one of the things I really would like to talk to you today is I would like to give you guys 5 ways to either nip that spiral in the bud before it happens, before that anxiety causes it, or how to deal with it after you have had that spiral. Now, most of the time when we think about spiraling, we think about individuals who have depression or anxiety. The truth is, anybody can spiral, and anybody who is having a stressful time can spiral. So these are techniques. These techniques I'm going to bring up are research techniques. They are techniques that I have used. They're techniques that I've had a therapist teach me, or my mother, who was a psychologist, has taught me. Or again, they are part of positive psychology, of mental first aid, or psychological first aid. And these are all things that I've had some training in, and again, read a lot of books on, and have employed these techniques. Generally, if I give you a technique, I've used it before and it has worked for me, or I have adjusted it so that it works for what I need it to do. And I encourage you that if anything that I teach you doesn't work quite the way you need it to and you need to adjust it, please do so. I mean, that is the point of any technique, is you need to adjust it to what works for you. So starting right off, the first thing that I would love to talk to you about is called grounding. Now, grounding is where you find yourself and you use all of your senses to bring yourself out of an anxious moment. So this can be used if you're about to spiral. This can be used in the midst of spiraling. This can be used if you are just in a very stressful situation. Maybe it's a meeting, maybe it's, I don't know. There's a lot of things that it could be. But the act of grounding is, again, using all of your senses, all 5 of your senses. And generally what you do is you make sure that you are either standing straight or you're sitting straight. Obviously, this is going to depend on where you're at when the stressful event occurs. And what you do is very simple. And you want to use the sense that you are gravitated to the first. So for me, I'm a visual person, so I'm going to start with my eyes. And you just pause and you go, what's one thing that I can see right now? For me, it's the blue of the couch across from me. What's one thing that I can feel? So we're using our tactile senses. So the velvet of my couch. What's one thing I can smell? Right now, I'm really smelling that chocolate cake on my counter that was from my birthday. What's one thing I can taste? I can taste the Pepsi that I just drank. And then what's one thing I can hear? And right now what I can hear is the quiet hum of my air conditioning. Sometimes you may need to do this technique a couple times, but the whole idea is it brings you back to the here and now and into your current reality. If you have to do it again, just find 5 different things that you can see, taste, feel, smell, and hear to bring you back down to the here and now. Again, that's a quick technique to ground yourself. So that's number 1. Number 2 is a breathing technique. And I think I've talked about this one before. I'm not sure. But it's called the 4-7-8 technique. And what you do generally is, once again, you're wanting to have a connection with the ground. So whether it's you're sitting or you're standing. Generally, I don't recommend doing this laying down. it doesn't work for me. It may work for you, but generally it's the sitting or the standing. And what you do is you close your eyes, you breathe in through your mouth for 4 seconds. You hold that breath for 7 seconds. And then you breathe out of your mouth for 8 seconds. Now, some people for that beginning breath prefer breathing through the nose. However, I have nasal problems, so I generally breathe through my mouth for that first breath. So it looks something like this. Now this technique, and I want to make sure that I'm pulling up the institute. There's a lot of institutes that talk about this technique and what it does, but the Arizona Center for Integrative Medicine has a pretty good flyer out there that explains some beginner tips for how to utilize this technique and talks to you about the steps for the relaxation exercise, and it's a great thing to just have printed out and have on hand. One thing I do want to tell you about this exercise is you do need to repeat it a couple times for it to take full effect. Now I can feel the full effect of it within 1 or 2 rounds of it, and I've had people that do this that have felt it almost immediately. They're like, wow, I feel like negative, the negativity or whatever it is, stress, kind of just flowed out, through my midsection down to my feet. And if you visualize that actually happening too while you're doing it, that's a huge help. And this is actually a natural tranquilizer to your nervous system. And it's a normal way to tell your body and your brain to calm down. And again, generally you want to do this about 4 times. When I first started, it caused me anxiety to do it more than a couple times, just because I thought, okay, I'm not breathing correctly. So I started with 2 and I was able to eventually increase to 4. And again, what I can tell you is even now I feel a lot more relaxed. So this is something that when you're in the beginning of a stressful situation or in the middle of one, you can do the 4-7-8 breathing technique to help you ground you before you try a grounding technique, or just in general to give you a moment to go, okay, I can do this, I can handle this, or I can think about this. So that's number 2. Number 3 is to get away from social media. I know that seems like an obvious thing, but it doesn't seem to be so obvious sometimes to us. We use social media to stay connected to our family, especially during this time, to express our opinions, just a whole variety of things that we use social media for. However, social media allows the masses to post whatever they want, to bombard your wall and their wall with negativity, because as human beings we seem to gravitate towards negativity. And honestly, for me, it's been a linchpin of a lot of my spirals, is something that I've seen on social media. And when I say social media, I don't just mean Facebook. I mean Instagram, YouTube, a lot of negativity on YouTube right now. I don't know, there's plenty more. Instagram, I don't know. Outside of Facebook and YouTube, generally, I don't do much. Twitter, whatever it is. Basically, get away from it. And honestly, something else that a lot of people don't know is there is a correlation between depression and anxiety and social media use. So according to the National Institute of Mental Health, they have done several studies that have shown that individuals who have an increased amount of time on any social media platform, and that includes gaming, by the way, that does include gaming, show a huge increase in depressive or anxiety episodes. And I'm happy to link that study in the section below. for you guys to see that too. So with avoiding social media though, here's the thing that I always harp on is you need a plan. So it's not just, oh, I'm just a couple days, I'm going to shut down from social media. No, you need a plan. So for example, the last time that I had to step away from social media, I said quite clearly to myself, for this week, I am not going to go on YouTube at all. Twitter's not an issue because I don't ever get on Twitter. But I wrote that into my plan. Facebook, because I do have a business page on Facebook, I do need to be a little bit active on Facebook. But my decision for that was I'm not going to look at my news feed anymore. I'm just not going to look at it because that's where a lot of the negativity and problems are. I will look at certain people's pages if I want to be updated on things that are happening with my family, with my church family, with the motorcycle group that I'm in. Those specific items, yes, I will look at those, but I will not look at my main news feed because that's where most of the issues are. And I also limited myself to how many times I would view the Facebook platform. And that was, I gave myself twice a day. And I saw a huge increase in my mental well-being and overall how I was feeling about myself and about the world around me. I wasn't avoiding my issues, I was simply giving my brain a break from them. Additionally with that, you have to consider the news media and I meant to say news outlet, but media in general. What are you consuming? Again, there's a lot of negative in the world, so there's a lot of negative being reported on the news. So for me, I have an alert set on my phone for when President Trump puts out a statement because I do need to know what the leader of our nation is saying. I also have alerts for the federal government when they're speaking to education and a couple other topics, as well as Arizona and education and a couple other topics, so that I am still aware of what's going on, but I'm not drowning in all of the negativity that is out there on CNN, Fox, Washington Post, whatever. And I've stuck to that plan. I'm going on almost 3 weeks now of sticking to that plan, and it definitely has increased my well-being and my self-worth without me feeling like I am depriving myself of the news that I feel like I need or the connection to those people that are part of those social platforms. So it's very important that you have a plan and that you stick to it. The fourth one is this is generally after a spiral. It's called analyzing the spiral, basically what it is. When I first started using this technique, generally it was like a day or two after I would have a major spiral that I would stop and sit down and analyze, honestly, the entirety of the spiral. So from the linchpin all the way up to the end of the spiral. And I drew the spiral and I got bigger and bigger as it went on. And each section of the spiral was labeled with either the topic that I thought about, the feeling that I had, the memory that I brought up, the person that was part of that spiral, whatever it was, it got labeled on that spiral. And then from there, I asked myself what started the spiral. Because sometimes when you're analyzing it, you don't 100% know what the linchpin was. But if you do know what started it, you can definitely help yourself make an action plan to be able to either avoid that obstacle or utilize that obstacle in a way that decreases the amount of spiraling that you have. The next kind of part of that is to consider, why were these topics so important? So each level, why? Why was that part of your thought process? Where did that come from? And you can see that each one can branch off into other questions. Where did that come from? Why is that so important to me that my brain would suddenly throw that at me as a Shazam? Why? And sitting down and writing that. And then the next one was And this one's kind of important. What can I do about it? Not what that person can do about it, not what he, she should be doing about it, not what my husband should be doing, not what my kids should be doing. What can I do about it? Because ultimately, the only thing you can control is yourself. And that's where the healing, that's where this needs to start. So, how can I, or what can I do about it? Generally, I don't allow myself, at least, to cop out and say, I don't know. Because that's not a constructive, that's not a productive answer. I can't do anything about it is a legitimate answer, though. And that's something that sometimes we have to accept is I can't do anything about the situation. But I can control how I react to it. The next one is, how can I handle this better? Again, this is I. How can I handle this better? Not how can they handle this better, not how can what they should be doing to help me. How can I handle this better? And it's not about what's fair, it's about what the reality is, and the reality is the person you can depend on, if you train yourself to do so, is you. And then the next part is one of the most important, and that's the action plan. What am I going to do? What am I going to do to make this memory fade away? What am I going to do to forgive myself for this? What am I going to do to stop this type of spiral before it happens? And that may lead into the getting away from social media. But what am I going to do? I highly encourage you when you do this to do this as free writing. So you can use these questions as a guide, or you can come up with your own as you go along free writing. But the act of free writing is you're emptying basically your thoughts, that mess that's in your head, out so that you can see it and you can properly go analyze it. And there's been times when I've done that where I've circled a piece and I've got written ha ha at the end because I'm like, wow, that was a ridiculous thought process. But it's one I need to be aware of that I do. And that really leads into number 5, journaling. I mean, it sounds so simple. As kids, some of us had diaries and had journals, and honestly, journaling is so powerful because, again, you're pouring out the real you onto this paper, or if you type, onto the keyboard. And generally it's temporary. It's a temporary relief. But if you take it from there, you've written this out and you go back into the analyzation stage, you can pinpoint where it is that you need to work on so that you feel better about yourself, so that you're happier. So those are generally the 5 techniques that I have used over the years, many years, to either stop a spiral, help stop a spiral, analyze a spiral, and hopefully stop. Most of the time after a couple times, I can make myself stop inserting a piece of a spiral into my future spirals. So I can make that stop. I can come to terms with it. I can forgive myself for it. I can get some closure on it. And sometimes we can't get closure from other people, so we have to give ourselves that closure. So again, those are 5 techniques that I use. I highly encourage you to research them, to try them out for yourselves. And as always, customize them to what works for you. All right, I'm always available for questions, comments, concerns. Please leave them in the comment section below. And I will see you guys next time.